Limited Run's game release number 7 wasn't so much a lucky 7 as a timely one. Eastasiasoft's Lost Sea was the most contemporary and the most modern of the company's releases to date. Here, Limited Run dipped a toe into the burgeoning new genre known as the rogue-lite. The rogue-lite formula would become a Limited Run mainstay, eventually leading to a luxe physical release for the granddaddy of the type, Derek Yu's Spelunky. But the boundaries and nature of the entire genre were still being sorted out when Lost Sea debuted in 2016. After all, it had only been 4 years since that minor freeware sensation called Spelunky had landed on Xbox Live and awakened the larger world to what fans of proper roguelike games had understood for decades. Namely, the unpredictable, white-knuckle appeal of unforgiving, procedurally generated games haunted by the specter of permanent character death. Roguelites took their creative cues from the roguelike, which in turn descends from a primitive-looking 1980 cult game called, fittingly, Rogue. Designed for play on networked systems whose dumb terminals lacked graphical display capabilities, Rogue rendered its entire world of dungeons, monsters, and treasures with ASCII text. The player's mighty avatar consisted of an @ symbol, while enemies tended to appear as a different letter of the alphabet. A bat might be rendered as a B, while a vampire would show up as a V. One letter apart on the keyboard, but vastly different in terms of their threat level, given that vampires could permanently reduce a player's maximum hit points, while a bat just kind of fluttered around. Which is to say that while Rogue looked almost idiotically simple, in practice its design was anything but. Its world was defined by complex rules and no 2 sessions of the game played the same. Not only did the layouts of mazes and the placement of monsters change every time players started a new game, even basic details including which colors of potions were helpful or harmful, such as which ones granted strength and which ones were poisonous, were shuffled around each time. With this unpredictability came danger, heightened by the fact that Rogue left little room for forgiveness. Once the player's character ran out of hit points, that was a permanent game over, forcing them to launch a new session with a new starter character. Rogue was quickly followed by dozens of games that mimicked its principles while building on them, the so-called roguelike genre. It's not unlike how we all called first-person shooters Doom clones in the early days, except no one ever came up with a better term for these games than roguelike. Roguelikes initially took the form of other ASCII-based adventures like Rogue, but they eventually took on more appealing graphical appearances once they migrated to consoles through games like Sega's Dragon Crystal and Chunsoft's Sharon the Wanderer. Even Pokemon has dabbled in the format. The Pokemon Mystery Dungeon games, descended directly from Sharon the Wanderer, are by far the best-selling and most popular roguelikes of all time. But even if you stick Pikachu on the box, a roguelike can still be a hard sell for many people. Roguelikes are slow-moving adventures and tend to get off to a simplistic start, with more advanced tactics and situations not arriving until you've made a fair bit of progress, or in the case of Pokemon Mystery Dungeon, until you've completed the main quest. For modern games accustomed to instant gratification and pick-up-and-play simplicity, the roguelike can be hard to love. Enter the rogue-lite. The rogue-lite is exactly what it sounds like, a rogue-inspired game, but simplified to be more approachable. The principles of roguelite design stretch back to at least 1991, when Sega published ToeJam and Earl for the Genesis, a cooperative action game filled with bizarre characters and plenty of platform hopping, but nevertheless featuring random maps and item placement, and the need to identify the unknown tools and power-ups the players collected. It would be more than 2 decades until roguelites would finally have their day thanks to games like Spelunky, which riffed on 8-bit computer classic Spelunker and integrated tons of unpredictability and the threat of failure, leading to an absolute back-to-the-start reset. Spelunky debuted on PCs in 2008 and hit the big time 4 years later on Xbox 360, and its success inspired a massive influx of games in a similar vein, combining the principles of randomization and permadeath with other genres ranging from management sims to platformers to action RPGs. And so we come to Eastasiasoft's Lost Sea, a strong entry in that second wave of roguelites. Lost Sea marries top-down character action to procedural generation and light exploration, along with a dash of board game mechanics, ending up with something that falls in between a classic Legend of Zelda adventure and, say, Zombies Ate My Neighbors. Lost Sea begins with a simple premise. You are an explorer who's become stranded in a series of mysterious archipelagos, thanks to the otherworldly shenanigans of the Bermuda Triangle. Your one goal is simply to escape the islands and return to civilization, which you can only accomplish by tracking down area maps inscribed on the stone tablets scattered around each island. Along the way, you can team up with other lost travelers, seek treasures, and trade in cash and experience points to upgrade your ship and your own survivability. There's a definite final days of the British Empire vibe to Lost Sea's character and vehicle design. You begin the game by selecting one of 8 characters that include professorial gentlemen, Edwardian lady adventurers, and a local islander. Your choice of avatar is strictly cosmetic, as all 8 survivors play alike, and each begins their adventure amidst the flotsam of their wrecked vehicle. Within moments of regaining consciousness, you stumble across a machete that allows you to whack bushes and clear paths, and whack enemies to prevent them from attacking you. The wild animals and humanoid beasts that populate the Lost Archipelago really only have one thing in common. They hate you and want you dead. Your machete is your primary source of offense as you venture forth, and there's no upgrade chain. Your trusty bushwhacker will see you through to the end. Your explorer has only the most basic skills at their command. You can walk, hit things with your machete, and carry stuff. That's it, and somehow that's supposed to carry you through 6 increasingly deadly sets of islands filled with deadly hazards, where one bad hit can end your adventure and reset hours of effort. Yes, in true roguelite fashion, Lost Sea is a one-and-done kind of affair. If your adventurer falls in combat, that's it. All your progress is lost and it's back to the start. The developers were so serious about this, the game doesn't even have a suspend feature. The only way to take a break is to put the PlayStation 4 into rest mode. 100 hit points is all that stands between you and losing hours of progress. Well, sort of. As you soon learn, your avatar isn't the only lost soul on these islands. As your journey unfolds, you'll constantly bump into other castaways. You can ask one to tag along with you and help on your quest. The other refugees can't help in combat, they simply cower helplessly in place when monsters go on the attack. But each potential crew member comes with their own randomized set of skills. Some are extra tough and can endure many more attacks than your own hero. Others amplify your attack power, allowing you to take out durable bad guys in a single hit. Some can dig for buried treasure, unlock chests you find along the way, or repair broken bridges. And by far the most valuable crew members have the ability to revive you if you fall in combat, essentially allowing you to cheat permadeath once. Each crew member can possess as many as 4 special skills. Sometimes you'll find a crew member whose traits are exactly what you need for a given island, but more often than not, you'll need to make compromises and decide which attribute is most essential at that moment. In the early going, that means you'll have to make trade-offs between desperately needed survival traits and helpful utility skills. Say there's a rare healing tree on the other side of a gap that can only be crossed by finding a crew member capable of building a bridge. But if your health is already dangerously low, maybe it would be smarter to stick with a companion who can revive you when you slip up in combat and accidentally take an elephant tusk to the face, rather than trading them away for someone who can build that bridge. As you play, however, these trade-offs become less critical, because you can customize your skills to adapt. Defeating enemies nets you experience points, which you can redeem at the dock on each island to boost your innate capabilities. Add-on skills include combat abilities like dash attacks and spin slashes, but it's even more essential to expand your passive powers in useful ways. You can increase the number of expendable items like health kits and body armor that you can carry at once. And you can boost your crew from 1 to 4 followers. On top of that, you can trade in the cash you uncover on the island to upgrade your ship, gaining the ability to spot potential crew members more easily, as well as enriching your options as you move from island to island. Ultimately, however, the most important thing to seek out as you venture into the islands isn't crew members or cash, rather it's the stone tablets you'll find hidden as you explore. Each island consists of multiple hexagonal areas, each of which can contain a variety of landscape types, ranging from fields of dense shrubbery to abandoned mining towns or craggy hillsides. What you really want to uncover are the ancient temple ruins, since they're most likely to contain the mysterious glowing statues where you can collect a stone tablet that charts a route to other islands. Once you acquire a tablet and carry it back to the docks, you can hop aboard your ship and use the information inscribed on the tablet to reach the next island in the chain. A single island can contain anywhere from 1 to 3 tablets, and the more tablets you acquire at a time, the greater the number of options you have for advancing to the end of the current archipelago. Once you choose to depart your current island, Lost Sea works almost like a board game. Each tablet is inscribed with a number between 1 and 4 that determines the number of spaces, that is, islands, you can skip ahead that turn. If you acquire a tablet with a value of 2, you can only move ahead to the second island forward in the chain. But if you acquire tablets worth 2, 3, and 4 all at once, you can move ahead either 2, 3, or 4 islands that turn. While making the largest leap possible might seem the logical choice here, since your goal is ultimately to forge ahead and reach the end of the current chain and advance to the next, that's not always the case. Each island is rated in terms of difficulty, either normal, medium, or hard, and some islands contain special hidden treasures worth seeking out. There are 18 treasures to find across the islands, and they're the only thing that carries over permanently from one game to the next. When your explorer dies, you're sent back to the very first island and lose all your boat and skill upgrades. But the treasures remain a permanent part of your collection. The only other permanent improvement you can earn is the ability to warp to later island chains that you've already reached when you start a new game. in case you don't want to muck around with the basic jungle islands yet again. Again, this isn't necessarily as intuitive a choice as you might think. While it's handy to be able to bypass the early areas, the game's difficulty rises dramatically beyond those islands, to a point where a fresh-rolled character will have a tough time surviving long enough on the advanced islands to build up their skills. In other words, Lost Sea is your quintessential rogue-lite. It's not a proper RPG, yet it's nevertheless infused with the risk-reward choices that make games like Mystery Dungeon and NetHack so engrossing. There's a sense of impermanence to everything in Lost Sea. Not only your fragile protagonist and their hard-earned upgrades, but even to the crew people who can tag along behind you and potentially die from a hard-hitting bad guy before ever making use of their unique skills. It's a textbook example of the genre's appeal and why it's proven such a popular facet of the limited run games catalog. And there's one other feature of note about Lost Sea. It was the company's first day one release. Lost Sea debuted digitally on multiple platforms on July 4th, 2016, the same day that the PlayStation 4 physical edition launched as limited run games catalog number 12.
20 years after the virus wars, a new conflict is nearing its climax. The Söldner-X legend rises once again.
Limited Run Games Catalog number 13, on the other hand, couldn't have been more different from Lost Sea. Whereas Eastasiasoft's island-hopping adventure fell smack into the midst of a burgeoning new trend in gaming, Soldner-X 2 Final Prototype, also published digitally by Eastasiasoft, is about as unabashedly old school as they come. Final Prototype harkens back to 8-bit side-scrolling shooters like Konami's Gradius and Irem's R-Type. You can even collect AI-controlled companion fighters to boost your attack power, similar to Gradius's options. For players who long for the score-chasing comfort of a pure test of Twitch skill, Final Prototype is a welcome respite from quirky indie games and inventive genre mashups. Which isn't to say Final Prototype is a pure retro gaming experience by any means. While it sticks closely to time-honored conventions and colors inside the lines of its genre, its old-school ethos doesn't go as far as its visuals or music. Germany-based developer SideQuest Studios managed to coax both intense, screen-filling combat and silky smooth, 60 frame per second visuals out of the humble PlayStation Vita hardware. It's a shiny, sleek-looking game with a fixed perspective polygonal graphics that make Final Prototype look like nothing so much as a high-end take on 32-bit classics like Einhander or G. Darius. The camera pans and swoops at key moments to create a sense of drama and heighten the excitement of entering a new area or facing a never-before-seen wave of enemy forces. This never happens in a way that gets in the way of the action or creates complications for the player. It just looks cool. That's not the only way in which Final Prototype belongs as much to the 32-bit era of shooters as it does the older generation. The enemy fleet and its attacks alternate between 8-bit style formation lines of tiny fighters, mid-sized carrier craft that call to mind 16-bit classics, and explosive 90s style Danmaku curtains of plasma that fill the screen and challenge the player to weave between projectiles. Final Prototype rarely relies on one style of gameplay too long, forcing players to remain alert and switch up their strategies from moment to moment as the enemy ranks update their own tactics. And then, of course, each stage culminates in a showdown with a massive boss. These vary in form, appearing as anything from massive war cruisers to what appear to be industrial mining machinery, but they all have the ability to soak up tons of damage as they shift between different phases and improvise new attack strategies. Frequently, their pilots will attempt to taunt the player over a radio broadcast, but this works both ways. Your home-based support team will also broadcast tactical information and offer combat advice to help boost your chances of victory. In short, Final Prototype plays like an homage to 3 decades worth of timeless shooters. And while it doesn't really offer any brilliant new ideas to put it in the same class of genre-defining works as the best cave or Hudson shooters from bygone days, it's a damn fine pastiche of the greats. And it's no mere rehash. Final Prototype operates under its own particular set of rules and mechanics to make sure that it never feels like a carbon copy of someone else's shooter, just a game whose creators took lots of notes along the way. As with most classic shooters, Final Prototype can be challenging to complete on any but the lowest difficult setting, but merely completing the game is not the point. Your objective here is not just to get through waves of fodder and destroy the enemy's leadership to see the credits roll, but rather to get there in style. Your performance in each stage is rated on a letter scale that dips all the way down into the F of failure, and simply muddling through the action to the end will rarely net you anything better than an E rating, maybe D if you're lucky, even if you manage not to lose a single life along the way. No, to truly master Final Prototype, you need to take down the enemy elegantly. You need to make use of chain effects and never let your combo timer run down. You need to fight efficiently but know when not to use the best weapon for the job in order to keep the chain count up. You need to hunt down hidden items or perform secret tasks in order to reveal special bonus opportunities. You need to become an expert in the game, then play like an expert. At the heart of Final Prototype's scoring mechanic is a chaining system that ties into the game's central weapon system. Your fighter craft comes equipped with 3 different weapons. These can be traded for alternate weapons dropped by enemies, but you can also use the Vita's shoulder triggers to swap between the ones you currently have. The available gun options include standard forward fire, a wide dispersal beam, a high-powered wave cannon, and more. Each weapon type comes in handy against different enemies and formations, but it's not always best to swap between guns in favor of tactical superiority, since switching causes your chain multiplier to drop. The multiplier, of course, boosts the number of points you earn for gunning down bad guys, which means you constantly need to balance your loadout between maximum firepower and maximum points. The two aren't always necessarily the same. On top of that, Final Prototype throws in other considerations for you to bear in mind. For example, there are the secret keys. Each stage contains multiple hidden keys that can be collected by performing certain tasks, usually but not always destroying a specific enemy or formation. And collecting 4 or more keys in a single stage unlocks more of the game. You also have special screen-clearing bombs and boost attacks, the usual shoot-'em-up niceties. Also worth noting is Berserker Mode, a boost you activate automatically when your ship is in critical condition. Berserking boosts your damage output and reduces the damage you absorb, which means you might actually live long enough to recover some health and continue fighting. Overall, it's a refined, expanded take on the original Soldner-X Himmelstürmer, a PC game created in 2007 specifically as a classic shooter homage. This sequel carried forward many of the same classic principles and contemporary mechanics seen in the first game, with better graphics and more intricate workings. Eastasiasoft originally published Soldner-X 2 Final Prototype for PlayStation 3 in 2010, though Limited Run's physical release in August 2016 was strictly of the excellent Vita port.